All right, let's get right into it. Deep in the heart of one of the world's most complete overseas Chinese education systems, something truly unexpected is happening. It's a story that really makes you rethink the whole idea of culture and community.
I mean, just think about that for a second. Imagine a system built for generations to protect a very specific heritage, and then suddenly its future seems to be falling into the hands of, well, outsiders. That's pretty much exactly what's going on in Malaysia right now.
And it all kicks off with this one single number. Get this. Today, almost 1 out of every 5 students in Malaysia's Chinese primary schools is non-Chinese. That's 20%. We're not talking about a small fringe trend here. This is a massive shift.
So why is this happening? Well, let's take the story of a guy named Zainal. He's a Malay father, and he doesn't just send his kids to Chinese schools, he actually speaks Mandarin with them at home. For him, the choice was a no-brainer. It's partly about giving them a competitive edge, sure, but it's also about the values he sees in the system. You know, that focus on discipline and a deep respect for elders.
And when you have thousands and thousands of parents like Zainal making that same choice, it marks a really surprising shift. It's turning these community schools into these incredible multicultural hubs. But, as we're about to see, it's also kicking off a very complicated debate within the Chinese community itself. And here's the thing. While this big influx of new students is a huge sign of success, it's also creating this deep, underlying anxiety. It's become a genuine paradox, a real double-edged sword that cuts right to the heart of the community's identity. And it's forcing them to ask one very, very tough question. Is this whole trend a blessing that's going to ensure their survival? Or is it a kind of curse that threatens the very culture these schools were built to protect in the first place? And this really lays out the dilemma perfectly. On one hand, it's a total blessing, no doubt about it. You've got declining birth rates in the Chinese community, and a lot of rural schools were on the verge of shutting down. These new students are a lifeline, literally saving schools and showing just how successful the system is. But then you flip the coin, and you see this growing fear of identity erosion, this worry that the school's unique Chinese essence will get watered down. Will school meetings start happening in Malay instead of Mandarin? Will cultural traditions start to fade as the faces in the classroom look so different? And this quote from a Malaysian educator just captures that anxiety perfectly. The fear is that the schools will get hollowed out, right? That they'll just become language centers without the soul, the cultural DNA that has defined them for more than a century. And this whole identity thing, it doesn't just stop at primary school. In fact, for the students who go all the way through this system, the challenges just get bigger and more intense, creating this huge bottleneck when it's time for university. Now, to get this, you need to know about a really key institution, the Independent Chinese High Schools, or Duzhong. Basically, these are private high schools paid for by the Chinese community that keep Mandarin as the main language for teaching. And that means they operate completely outside the national system. And this is where the big problem starts for the graduates. They get a diploma called the Unified Examination Certificate, or UEC. And the paradox here is just staggering. The UEC is accepted by top universities all over the world. We're talking Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, the UK. But it is not recognized for getting into Malaysia's own public universities. It's wild. So the big question is, where do all these kids end up? Well, a major report from 2018 by Dong Zong, which is the main group that represents these schools, gives us a really clear picture. The data shows that, yeah, a majority do stay and study in Malaysia, usually at private universities. But look at that other number. A giant chunk, almost 38%, either choose to or are basically forced to pack their bags and go study overseas. And where are they all going? The vast majority are heading to China and Taiwan. And let's be clear, this isn't just a number on a chart. This is a massive brain drain. The country is systematically pushing some of its smartest, most multilingual talent out the door. If you really want to feel how tight this bottleneck is, just look at this number. According to that same report, the percentage of these high school grads who actually got into a Malaysian public university was 0.09%. Yeah, you heard that right. It's practically nothing. So you have to ask, right? How is that even possible? Why on earth is the system set up in a way that just slams the door shut on thousands of high-achieving students from their own country's universities? Well, the answer is tangled up in this long-running and super controversial part of Malaysia's education system, the university bottleneck. At the very heart of this is something called the quota system. It's an affirmative action policy that goes way back to the 1970s, and it reserves a big majority of the spots in public universities for what are called Bumiputra students, which means sons of the soil. Now, this policy basically created two totally different paths to get into university. Non-Bumiputra students usually have to take the STPM, which is this grueling two-year program that's known around the world for being incredibly tough. The other option is matriculation, which is a one-year fast track. It's generally seen as less difficult. And here's the kicker. 90% of its spots are reserved for Bumiputra students. So critics argue it creates a playing field that's just not equal from the very start. And as some political figures like Chan Quinn-Air have pointed out, this isn't just about one community's problem. It's a national problem. The argument they make is that this isn't really about race. It's about a flaw in the system. A flaw that's causing Malaysia to lose its best and brightest to other countries, year after year. So you take all of this, the changing faces in primary schools, the huge roadblocks in higher education, and it brings the Malaysian Chinese community to this really profound crossroads of identity. So, what's the way forward? Well, there are basically two competing ideas on the table. Vision number one is to double down, to protect the purity and the cultural core of the system, no matter what. But the second vision is to lean into the change, to evolve into a truly multicultural place that shares its strengths with all Malaysians, no matter what their background is. And that whole debate brings us right back to where we started. Remember that question about who the guardians of a culture could be? Well, after looking at the whole picture, that question suddenly feels a lot heavier, a lot more profound. Could it actually be that, in some strange twist of history, the very people who step up to defend and carry this vibrant culture into the future won't be Chinese at all? It's a powerful thought, and it's one that completely redefines what it means to carry a cultural torch for the next generation.